Hello everybody, my name is Ray Kruse, Food Systems Program Coordinator and Master Gardener Coordinator with the ISU Extension Outreach Office, Dubuque County, and today we are talking about soil sampling. It's October 2nd, 2020, and we just had our first frost last night. And you might be thinking, should we be wrapping things up for the year instead of soil sampling? But you know the optimal time to send a soil sample to the laboratory for a garden is anytime the soil can be worked. It's nice to send it in the fall because that way you have all winter to calculate your amendments and source those amendments so that you can hit the ground running next spring. Now, when taking a soil sample, all you really need is a pail and a garden trowel. You don't really need a soil probe because you can receive great results using these two things. One of the primary things that a homeowner should consider when sending a soil sample to the laboratory is what soils to include in that final sample. And we're going to talk about that here. We are on site with this house, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this perennial bed that this homeowner is going to want to put around the entire house. And that's marked off here by this blue rope. And before identifying where we're putting that perennial bed, we called 811 to identify our utilities. Now, this homeowner here is looking to put one entire perennial bed around the entire house. So we're going to submit one soil sample because this will eventually be backfilled with all the same soil. And it's best to sample or test the final soil that's going to be here, but for the filming location, this is what we had to work with. But what we'll do is submit one sample for around the entire house. An example where we're going to submit two samples is if we had a vegetable garden that existed out on the lawn, where we fertilized annually, tilled annually, and maybe took vegetables and fruits off. And that's managed a little differently than this perennial bed here where we're not really doing those practices. So that's an example where we submit one sample for the perennial bed and one sample for the vegetable garden. Now, moving on to actually taking our soil sample. A soil sample consists of many little subsamples. And those subsamples, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that right here. We'll put our pail up here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to our bed that we're going to put our plants into, or that we already have plants in, and we're going to dig a hole down in the soil. And what we're going to do is we're going to dig down to 6 inches for beds in areas that are typically tilled. This would be perennial gardens, vegetable beds, things like that. Typically, we sample down to 6 inches. If we had an established lawn, we'd only do 3 inches, or if we were planting really large shrubs or trees, we would go down to 1 foot. But in this instance, we're only going down to 6 inches, and I have that marked here on my trowel with this black marker. But what we're going to do is we're going to dig that hole down to the 6-inch sampling depth, and then what we're going to do is on the side of the hole, we're going to cut a slice off the side of that hole. So I'm going to go 1 inch back from the side of the hole, and I'm going to slice straight down. And we're going to take out that slice. And what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our pail here and try and take out any plant debris and things like that. And we're just going to dump our soil right in there. And there we have what we call a sub-sample. Now, our full sample that we're going to send to the laboratory is going to consist of 15 of these sub-samples that we're going to do all the way around the house. And you're going to sort out rocks and grass and things like that before putting it in here. So I'll have you join me right back after we get those 15 subsamples taken. Now you probably got to subsample 8 or 10 and we're like, gosh, this is taking a lot of time, it's a lot of work. Do we really need to get to all 15 subsamples? Well, the answer is yes if you want a very good representation of the soils that are in your garden. And the reason why is demonstrated right here. I had our landscape contractor bring up some soil so that we could see what's going on. And this is the topsoil that's going to backfill our perennial beds. And just within this black topsoil that we have here, we have a lot of good, nice, rich, dark topsoil. But occasionally we have these pockets of lighter orange material. And this might test just a little bit differently than the rest of our actual topsoil that is representing our perennial bed. And so if we happen to hit this underneath of one of our subsamples that we're taking out in the garden, we might not know it. It might have a bad sample. So we might have 1 in 8 be bad instead of 1 in 15, which further dilutes a bad sample if we happen to have one. So I hope you learned a little bit as to why we're actually aiming for 15 subsamples. We have taken our 15 subsamples from all the way around the house. And now that we've got our subsamples taken, we have ourselves an actual soil sample. Now that we've got them all together, what we're going to do is we're going to break apart our soils so that all the pieces in here are less than the size of quarters. And then once we get done doing that, what we're going to do is we're going to mix our soil up very, very well. And we'll do this for about a minute. And to avoid boring you, I've already mixed this up pretty well already. So what we're going to do here is we are going to put our soil in our test baggie. And that is just simply a quart Ziploc baggie here. And we're going to pour it in there. And you might realize we left a lot of soil left back in the bucket that we just took out of the ground. But the important thing is that we have a little bit of all 15 subsamples in this actual soil sample to be sent to the laboratory. Now, laboratories most often will want you to have the bag labeled, as well as some supporting information or paperwork. And that paperwork tells the laboratory what tests you want done. Most gardeners have pH, organic matter, phosphorus, and potassium done on their soils to make general decisions. If you're in Iowa, all extension offices have access to the soil testing kit generated by the ISU Extension Outreach Office of Dubuque County. So seek out your local extension office if you are in Iowa to see if this resource is available to you. Now that you have your soil sample ready to be sent off to the laboratory, you will hopefully get some supporting information back to help you make good gardening decisions. This is Ray Kruse, Food Systems Program Coordinator and Master Gardener Coordinator with the ISU Extension Outreach Office of Dubuque County. Happy growing, everybody!